Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Hey folks, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you, you can unlock unlimited access to political news, commentary, opinion, and a whole lot more at inforum.news/port for only 99 cents a month for your first 3 months. Hurry, get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. And this Friday, we're going to be talking to a couple of candidates on North Dakota statewide ballot. First up in a moment, going to be getting to Riley Kuntz. He's running in the North Dakota Republican primary for the United States Senate, challenging John Hoeven. Yes, Hoeven has another challenger. He had a challenger at the NDGOP state convention in Rick Becker. He survived that challenge. Now he has a challenger in the June primary. In the person of Riley Kuntz. We'll be talking with him in just a moment. Also coming up a little bit later in the show, going to be talking with Jeffrey Powell. He's an administrator at Mayville State University. He's running for North Dakota Secretary of State as a Democrat. He's will be challenging one of two potential Republican candidates. Castleton State Representative Michael Howe is running for that seat as well, and received the convention endorsement. And then Auto Service Advisor Marvin Lepp of Bismarck is also running in the June primary. But we'll talk with Jeffrey a little bit later in the show. Right now, I want to get to my first guest, Riley Kuntz. Riley, how you doing?
Good. Good morning, Rob.
Tell us, why are you taking on Hoeven?
Well, it seems like the right time, Rob. There's really a lot to it. You know, campaigning for both Mike LaFleur and Kelly Armstrong, they both said to run for position. You know, I think they were more so hinting at like a school board thing, but that might be a bit hypocritical because I'm not going to send my kids to school. We're going to do homeschool. So, you know, we'll just go after Senator Hoeven in the primary. One of the other reasons is I didn't like what happened at the state convention. And I think I'm the guy to do it.
Well, let's start. What don't you like about John Hoeven? Obviously he's a Republican. He's an incumbent. He's been there for a long time. He's a known quantity to North Dakotans. He's been on statewide ballots since 2000 and consistently gets, around 70% of the vote. Seems like North Dakotans are pretty happy. What are you seeing there that you think could be done better?
I think he can be more aggressive in protecting North Dakota, especially right now. I mean, we are in an economic crisis, and there isn't much that he's doing to help the state or the United States generally. So inflation is through the roof, and I think he just voted to send altogether like $53 billion of foreign aid to Ukraine. And if it's that big of a deal, then maybe we should have boots on the ground. But we don't have boots on the ground there. We just put them down on the ground in Somalia. So it's clearly Ukraine isn't a top priority militarily. So I think we can maybe cut back on some spending there for sure. The same thing with the $5 a gallon gas. I mean, almost, right? $4.79 for premium, over $5 for diesel. Let's take more aggressive action to push back on Biden's terrible anti-oil policies for the country.
I think Hoeven would argue that he has. I mean, he's one vote out of 100 in the United States Senate, but, you know, I think he would, it's pretty hard to argue with his energy policies. I mean, he is in favor of the Keystone Pipeline. He's sponsored legislation in the past to try to, you know, force that pipeline through and to get it approved. I mean, I don't know that the oil industry has a lot to complain about when it comes to John Hoeven. Now, the funding for Ukraine, I mean, I guess that's that's a different matter. I personally, I want to check Vladimir Putin. I think he's a very real threat to the world. I don't want him to win in Ukraine, and if spending American dollars there is what's needed, then I say let's do that. And I don't want to put boots on the ground in Ukraine because, unlike Somalia, that has American soldiers fighting another nuclear power. That's a different thing than putting boots on the ground in Somalia. So I guess, I don't know. I don't really have a problem with funding Ukraine, but I guess that's a very different point of view. Do you think that's something that's going to get traction with North Dakota voters?
I think so. Absolutely. When people's pockets start getting pinched, they start looking at things differently, and that's what I'm seeing out on the campaign trail. And
do you think North Dakotans are going to vote? Because what I'm seeing is that North Dakotans are probably more likely to blame the Democratic majorities, and granted it's a technical majority in the Senate, but like it or not, they have the Senate majority leader. They control the agenda in the United States Senate right now. But my take is that most North Dakotans aren't going to blame John Hoeven for that. They're going to blame our current Democratic leadership at the national level, and rightfully so.
Well, I guess we're going to find out in less than 30 days, bud.
Fair enough. So, let's talk a little bit about the. You said you weren't happy about what happened at the NDGOP state convention. I was there. I've been writing a lot about the divides in the North Dakota Republican Party. What did you see that you didn't like?
Well, I didn't like the busloads of people and shuffling around on the roster. The delegates that had paid their own way,
Yeah, I was looking, for instance, I'm thinking of like District 2. I don't know. Getting your people to the convention is the game, right? And both candidates seem to be playing it. I looked at, District 2, which is Tioga, which sent over 90 delegates to the state convention, which is an enormous number for a rural district like that. And they all voted, I'm pretty sure, almost, if not unanimously, nearly unanimously for Rick Becker. I don't begrudge them that. They got their people out. Isn't that the game?
That is the game, but, they did it in a different way. Everything was on the roster, pre-planned, and they paid their own way. Hey, that's politics. If that, I guess it's almost everything is fair in love and war, but, I don't like it. So I'm going to try it. And I think, people have seen his policies for, 12 years as governor, 12 years in the Senate, and let's call him home. We're talking, let's talk about term limits. 50,000, nearly 50,000 people in North Dakota wanted term limits to get on the ballot. It was struck down for a second time. Hey, he's got 12 years. Let's call it good there.
Yeah. The state, the term limits ballot measure would have applied to governor and the legislature. I think the Supreme Court's found that state level term limits for federal offices are unconstitutional, which to me makes sense. I think the United States Constitution should govern those federal offices, not state constitutions. But setting that debate aside, let's talk about your resume a little bit. Serving the United States Senate, that's a big deal. That's a tough job. Tell us a little bit about your resume. What commends you to this job?
Well, I'm not a career politician. I'm not really a politician at all. So that brings a unique skill set. I'll tell it like it is. If I don't have an answer, then I'm probably going to tell you that too. And, I've worked in the real world my whole life, and, grew up on a farm, currently roughnecking. That just brings a lot of common sense to the table. And I say that, it still means something. Like today, it seems that's even becoming less common, I guess, if you will. But unfortunately, there's something to it. You can see a problem, you can look at it, and you can problem solve and come to a different conclusion than what we've been trying for the last 12 years. It's worth a shot.
If you let's say you're successful in the June primary, you beat John Hoeven, and then you're successful in the November election and you beat Democratic candidate Katrina Christensen, and you're sworn into the United States Senate, what's the first bill you introduce?
Let's do something to start curbing government corruption. And that's a huge thing, and that spreads so far. We certainly need to tie into that. We certainly need to start limiting foreign aid. Let's start looking at immediately changing foreign aid policy to help this country before we start helping others.
Do you think that the opposite argument from that would be? I understand what you're saying. We have a lot of problems at home. Our budget is completely unbalanced. Republicans, Democrats, nobody's talking about balancing our budget anymore, and that frustrates me. But I look at our ledger, and as big as foreign aid is, and it's a lot of money in the context of our overall budget. It is far from the biggest line item. So why zero in on that? What is it about the foreign aid specifically that bothers you?
Well, we've seen what that doesn't do for us. We've been trying to do this police the world thing for quite a while, and that's almost a different topic in and of itself. But giving foreign money just doesn't seem to work. And in such a rush, especially in this instance, in such a rush, in such large quantities with no oversight, personally, that raises a lot of red flags for me.
What about, because I think a lot of times we think of foreign aid, we think of the Middle East, or we think of places where there's been war, but let's talk about foreign aid closer to home. A lot of times I think of Mexico, for instance, and we obviously have a very big problem with illegal immigration at our southern border. That has been an intractable problem, and I want the border secured. I want the people who I love it when people come to America and want to be Americans, but I want them to come through the legal process and become Americans, not people who are sort of living in the shadows. I don't think it serves us well to have a sort of shadow population. So my take on immigration is I want legal immigration to be very, very easy, and illegal immigration to be impossible. So you look at Mexico, for instance, and part of what I think the strategy can be for our foreign aid to Mexico is if we can help make Mexico a better place to live, then maybe Mexicans will want to stay in Mexico and not cross into America illegally. Does that sort of an argument hold any sway with you?
Yes, it does. The big problem is with that is they're not necessarily just Mexicans. There's people coming from everywhere through that location or through that whole country. And you're right, absolutely right. There needs to be some serious vetting taking place on who's coming in, right? Let's do it the legal way. We actually are pretty lax, in the overall scheme of things for citizenship. You try to get in, you try to move or become a citizen of Australia, for instance, and it ain't happening.
Yeah. I like that. I very much believe in America being the shining city on the hill. If people want to come to America and be Americans and seek prosperity here, who am I to begrudge them that? Hell, my ancestors did that from Germany and Norway. I'm not here to tell other people. I love that our country is a place where people are still beating down the door to get in, right? I think that's a positive thing about our country. What I don't like is the illegal immigration. To me, that's the problem. Come here legally. And I think there's things we can do to make legal immigration easier. And by the way, I think people sometimes forget this. America is routinely, and obviously it varies from year to year, but we are routinely at the top of the list when it comes to taking in refugees and immigrants. Year after year after year, we consistently take in more than any other country, not even adjusting for population, right? Granted, we have a pretty big population on the world scale, but we take in a lot. And I think that's a positive thing about our country. And I think it maybe puts the immigration debate into context. There's nothing wrong or evil with wanting to secure our southern border, especially given how easy we make it for people to come here legally.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. And that is, it used to be a bipartisan type of deal. I think even going back to President Clinton, who ironically, I think was the last guy to actually talk about a balanced budget. But anyway, he was in support of securing the border. Everybody knows it's important. But somehow we just, I think, let maybe emotions get in the way and make it an issue. Unfortunately, like, let's do that. And again, government corruption. There's lots of laws to follow. It is, I think, generally pretty dang easy to become a United States citizen. And exactly right. Let's do it the right way.
Let's talk for a minute, switch gears a little bit. And you talked about problems you saw at the convention. I was there as well. And I think a lot of what that speaks to is a divide in the Republican Party, not just in North Dakota, but nationally. But we've certainly seen struggles with that divide. And I think both you and I probably know the reasons for it, right? There's one faction. I think there's a real struggle right now to define what it means to be a Republican or what it means to be a conservative, since a lot of times we use those terms interchangeably. So let me ask that question to you. What does it mean to be a Republican? If you say you're a Republican, what should that mean to people in terms of what you stand for?
Well, you stand for a right to life, for sure. You keep freedoms. I mean, generally looking at the NDGOP's platform, it is perfect. Let's stand on that. And as the closer you align, I think, to that is going to be what we're actually calling Republicans, and the voting record is pretty much where the pudding is. And yeah, it is very unfortunate that, there's such a bitter resentment, in the party. We're talking about, having a governor personally kind of intervene in with his PACs and stuff. And it's in a bad state. And we certainly need to start fixing it. I hope that it doesn't get so carried away that people just get fed up and start voting Democrat.
Well, I'll tell you, you and I share. I suspect that you and I are probably on opposite sides of the divide in the Republican Party. But I agree with you that much is if Republicans don't get their act together, the beneficiaries are going to be Democrats, which I don't think. Listen, I have lots of Democrat friends, and I respect them and I love them, and I think their heart's in the right place for the most part. But I don't agree with their policies, and I don't want their policies to become law. And I'm afraid that the divide. So I guess speaking to that, what can Republicans do to heal the divide?
Well, I think cut back on the infighting. You know what I mean? Let the state or let the districts figure it out for themselves. And there's a lot of people that show up. Shoot, there's a lot of people running, right now, Rob, in the prime. Like
I just wrote a column. North Dakota has, usually in legislative primaries, there'll be, maybe a half dozen or so competitive legislative primaries across the state. This time around, there's 21 just on the Republican side, and then there's 3 more on the Democratic side. And some of that is due to redistricting where, people got lumped in together, and I guess you're going to see some of that anytime you redraw the boundaries. But a lot of that is attributable to the very divide that we're talking about.
Yep, exactly. That's like half the districts. So
let me run you through, because I pulled up the Republican platform, and because I hear this all the time that, we got to stick to the platform. So I'm looking at it right now, and one of them is personal responsibility, right? It says, this is what the platform says for the North Dakota Republican Party. It says, individuals and families are responsible for their behavior. Public policy should encourage and empower their efforts to provide for their own health, safety, education, moral fortitude, and personal wealth. So I'm thinking about that, and on one hand, like let's think about it in the context of like mental health, right? I think somebody, on one hand we could say, well, let's fund mental health initiatives so that people can take personal responsibility and be able to access services, right? That's something that the government can do to empower people to take care of themselves. But I think the other side of that argument might be, and I'm not trying to attribute a position to you. I have no idea what your position is on this. But the other side of that argument might be, well, people should pay for their own mental health, and that's not the government's job. I think it's really hard because when you look at the platform, there's a lot of different ways to interpret some of these things, and there's a lot of different paths to achieving some of this. So when I hear people say all the time, well, I stand for the Republican Party platform. Well, okay, but when you make public policy, it's a lot more complicated and a lot more nuanced to that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely, and that's a great topic, Rob. Personal responsibility is a key cornerstone to a successful United States. I think, everybody complains about regulation, and that's something I look forward to rolling back responsibly. But, let's take an example. If people weren't dumping their engine oil, for instance, or their tires in lakes, then we'd have much less reason to have the EPA, right, in the first place. And now, everybody's complaining that they're overreaching. Well, I agree. But, let's step back a little bit and look at ourselves. Can we be responsible adults? Can we try to take care of the land, the air, whatever, everything, right? And that's just one instance, I guess, with the EPA. Pick another one, and it's the same thing. Let's take responsibility for ourselves. And I think to better answer your question, if we look at another one, there's fiscal responsibility. So, yes, of course, setting policy is very difficult, but I think we need to look at the whole scheme. And mental health, that's a tough one. That is definitely a tough one. North Dakota has some serious mental health problems. I think suicide rates are very high,
particularly among men. And I mean, you would expect it. I mean, you look at our primary industries; they're commodity-based industries, and you work in the oil industry. You know all about the wild swings. Oil prices are sky high. Oil prices are rock bottom. Crop prices are high. Crop prices are low. Oh, here comes a blizzard to completely screw up all your plans for pumping oil and growing crops this spring, right? I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that's our primary industry, and boy, those swings are hard to take, and somebody gets caught out, and now all of a sudden their livelihood goes up in smoke, and they're struggling with that. And I think that's one reason why North Dakota struggles with, like, suicide as one example of the mental health problems.
Yeah, it's terrible. It really is,
I guess the thing is that there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of different ways to do this. Tell me this: you came in. Why did you come in so late? We have a whole process leading up to the convention. You were saying how important it was in the divide in the Republican Party to let legislative districts decide for themselves. But there was a whole process. You weren't a candidate when all the local conventions were having their all the local districts were having their local conventions, and the statewide candidates were showing up and speaking at them and all that kind of stuff. You weren't a candidate during all that process. Why not? Why didn't you jump in this race earlier?
Well, I was really actually banking on Rick Becker. So, and I still maintain he's a better candidate than I am. But unfortunately, he was eliminated, and I respect his decision to not follow, or to not make or to go around the convention, if you will. So that is why it's such a late entry. It's very unprepared, and I think we're seeing the results of that, unfortunately. But it's what happened.
So how do you overcome that? I mean, John Hova's obviously, he's an incumbent. He has been involved in North Dakota politics for over 2 decades. Arguably one of the most successful politicians our state's ever seen. He's got a war chest. He has millions of dollars of contributions that he can use, and you don't. So how do you overcome that?
Well, we'll lean on the grassroots side and just do everything I can to get my name out there. And I think I stand for I think my platform is pretty solid. So just lean on that and then do whatever I can,
Why do you think Rick Becker didn't run to the primary?
To go around he's not making a primary challenge or he's not going against the the convention.
Right.
You know?
But you didn't show up at the convention.
Right.
Okay. Do you think part of it is, and this is my pet theory, I think part of it is that if Rick Becker ran on the June primary, we might find out that he's not really as popular as maybe some of his Facebook activism, and that makes him seem. That's kind of my take on it.
Okay. Yeah, that's maybe a fair conclusion. I wasn't out campaigning, so I don't know the general reception. You know, locally in Dickinson, excuse me, there's a pretty strong faction, I guess, if you will. Pretty strong support. And maybe it's more so on the western side of the state. But it would definitely be an interesting...
I agree with that.
You know.
Yeah. I wish he'd run just because it would give me more stuff to write about, right? that's my very selfish reason for wanting that sort of thing. And let's last question. You know, speaking about and again, I think this is very much at the heart of the divide, and people are saying, well, you know, let the local district convention speak for themselves, but you have all these candidates that are running to the June primary anyway. One of the problems I have with local district conventions is that the only people who vote there are sort of the Republican insiders who have the time and are connected enough to the party to show up at local conventions. It's a very, very small number of people compared to the number of people who vote in the June primary. So explain to me, why are the conventions better than the primary vote?
Well, it kind of adheres to the policy or to the party a little bit more, right? Yeah. I mean, that's the whole purpose to them, is kind of let the party, you know, decide. You do, I mean, have some very valid points there. How to overcome it, I guess, is why we're looking at having such a hot contest in the primary.
We are. I'll tell you one thing. I would like to see our state get voter registration. Just because my one problem with the June primary is that it's open, and it allows a lot of people, it allows Democrats to vote in the Republican ticket, right? Democrats usually don't have competitive races. I mean, they're struggling to find enough candidates to run. I mean, Republicans have competitive primaries. Democrats are just trying to fill all the slots. They don't have very many. So there's a lot of incentive there for Democrats to kind of jump over and meddle with the Republican ticket. And I think voter registration would fix a lot of that. You have to declare ahead of time, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? And then that's the ballot you get to vote on to select the party's nominee. I would like to see that happen in North Dakota. We're the only state in the union without voter registration. I think it's time. What do you think?
Well, I'm on the fence. You know, unfortunately, there's pros and cons to both. I do like the easy access to the polls.
Yeah.
But I'm a little concerned about, you know, changing that on the same token there. So
sure.
Yeah. Fortunately, there's no definitive answer right there, at least for now.
Yeah. Well, Riley, I certainly appreciate your time and reaching out and wanting to come on the podcast. That's awesome. Real quick, if people want to find out more about your campaign, follow you out on the trail, how do they do that?
Well, there's a Facebook page, and then it's Riley Kuntz for Senate 2022. And my web page is rileykuntz.me.
Yeah, and his name is spelled RileyKuntz. And yeah, I'm sure Google, Facebook, you'll find it. Riley, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, just finished up the interview with Riley Kuntz, who, let's face it, he's got a job in front of him if he wants to take on John Hoeven. But also, hey, that's the process, right? People can jump in. That's the American system. If people want to jump in and give it a shot, they're more than happy to. And who knows? You know, sometimes a candidate can catch fire. Anyway, we're going to move on, and we're going to speak with a man who is, he's seeking the Democratic nomination for Secretary of State, but he's running unopposed in that race. So let's face it, he's the Democratic-NPL candidate for Secretary of State. Jeffrey Powell. His Republican candidates are Representative Michael Howe, State Representative Michael Howe from Castleton. He's currently in the legislature. He's running for Secretary of State. He received the party's convention endorsement, and he's facing off in the June primary against fellow Republican Marvin Lepp. But neither of them are on the show. Jeffrey Powell's on the show, so let's talk with Jeff. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
So, what made you want to run for Secretary of State?
Well, Rob, the very basis of a democratic society is the right of the people to vote for their own government. And around the country, we're seeing that right is being curtailed. Now, that's not new. Here in North Dakota, we did the same thing in 2016. We had some voter suppression laws that were hidden behind the ID laws and the tribal IDs. And, the courts sorted that thing out. But, we see this happening around the country. I think the reigning theory is that Republicans know their policy initiatives are losing popularity. The younger generation is being hurt by Reaganomics, the butt end of 40 years of Reaganomics. And so as younger voters replace older voters, we have some laws that are being put in place to make it harder for people to vote. I'm running, Rob, because I love this country. I love the Constitution. I love North Dakota. I'm a fierce advocate of freedom and fairness, and I can't stand by and listen to the two guys that I'm running against talk about ballot integrity, which is a coding word to take away people's right to vote.
Boy, a lot there to unpack that I disagree with. I don't think North Dakota passed any voter suppression laws, and in fact, the courts largely upheld them. I think Heidi Heitkamp needed a talking point in 2018 to get out the Native American vote, and North Dakota's voting laws that were supposedly suppressive for Native Americans, they were allowed to stand by the U.S. Supreme Court, and we saw record Native American turnout in 2018. So I really have to take exception to your claim. I don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's based in reality, at least as far as North Dakota goes. I'm not vouching for what other states did, but in North Dakota, to say that about North Dakota, I don't think it's factually accurate.
Well, so we're 60 seconds in and we disagree with something. That's cool. Let's keep going, man.
It's not a matter of disagreement. I think it's not factual to say that. Tell me, what characteristics of the law that we passed in 2016 do you think were voter suppression?
Well, the street address element that required a good deal of activism to take care of, the printing of the IDs that needed to be taken care of, the address piece, which isn't jinky in and of itself, but it was enacted because there was the knowledge that there would be people who would be unable to vote in that particular way. You can't use a P.O. box to get a ballot. And yet we know that the 40,000 or so folks that live on the reservations, that was how they got their mail. That is how they get their mail.
Yeah.
And so
the legislature's been trying to get the reservations to implement the 911 address system, which is how we address having physical addresses out in the rural parts of the state. The legislature had been trying to get the tribes to update their systems for years before that voter ID issue came along. Is the problem what the legislature did, or is the problem that the tribes were failing their people and not implementing that, not just for voting, but for safety as well? How do fire departments and medical responders and law enforcement people find where they're going in rural North Dakota without better 911 addresses?
The existence of an E911 system, which is in place, is completely different than does it need to be printed on your ID. Those are two different elements entirely.
But not really, because if you have the 911 address, then you have the addresses. And that satisfies the ballot requirement. These are not – this is part of my problem with the way we debate this, is we impute evil intent to policies that we maybe just don't like, or we just invent evil intent. I think a lot of the voter suppression argument in North Dakota came because Heidi Heitkamp needed a talking point in 2018, and that's it. I don't think we had a problem. I think North Dakota's laws have been fair, and I don't think there was any ill intent or ill motivation to North Dakota's laws.
I don't agree. I think that there was a plan, but I do also agree with what you just said, Rob, that I think oftentimes we do impugn negative motivations to people who do things that we don't understand or don't like. I do agree with that, and we need to figure out a way to dial that back.
How do we dial it back? Because I think that's going to be a big part of your race. You look at nationally, we are polarized, and I don't like it. North Dakota was a place that not that long ago wasn't so polarized. We were a state that were electing Republicans and Democrats on the statewide ballot with large majorities. When you think back to the days when people like Kent Conrad and Byron Dorgan and Earl Pomeroy were winning elections handily on the same ballot as people like Al Jaeger and Wayne Stenhjem and John Hoeven, who are all Republicans. North Dakota's not that place anymore.
Right.
And that polarization has happened, and I think a lot of it is, agree with it or not agree with it, North Dakotans have lost trust, lost faith in the Democratic Party. So speak to that. As a Democratic candidate trying to win over that electorate, how do you do it?
And you are absolutely correct in assessing that this is a tough nut to crack. As our small towns, our newspapers have shut down, as our newspapers have turned into newsletters rather than newspapers, that loss of journalism, I think, has really changed the nature of how we talk about things. I am worried about the impact that Fox News has, and I guess the other side of the equation could apply as well, but that's not the question you asked.
Does absolutely apply. This is not. I hate Fox News. I loathe Tucker Carlson, which I think is pretty clear from my writing, but I also loathe every left-wing demagogue that we have to suffer through on MSNBC and CNN. They aren't doing us any favors either.
But your question was about the conversation that we need to have with Republicans to help move them to the middle. Yes, you were right. The other way needs to happen as well. And here's the thing. Most of those evening shows are not news. Those evening shows are opinion. Those evening shows are digested and spit out news morsels. We're not doing ourselves any favor by collecting our news from that site. I don't know how to make news better. I don't know how to make the argument more factual. But yes, that is a part of what we need to do. Here's the thing. We know that if you put a list of Democratic initiatives next to a list of Republican initiatives, most people, like 4-1, will choose Democratic initiatives. They like protecting Medicare. They like protecting Medicaid. They want to make sure that there's some sort of family leave policy that is part of something that everybody can expect to have. 60% of North Dakotans voted for abortion 8 years ago. We know that there are elements that are part of the Democratic platform that are not a part of the Republican platform, and yet the Republicans are beating us on branding. And so what we need to remind folks is that the brand that the Republicans are putting out there is not what they're going to deliver.
Do you think, how do you drill that down into your rate? Because Secretary of State doesn't have anything to do with Medicare or Medicaid or any of those things.
Not a thing.
You're talking about the voter integrity thing, but I don't know. I mean, Al Jaeger was reelected on the same statewide ballot that, Heidi, we were seeing national news stories about our supposed voter suppression in North Dakota. I'm not sure that most North Dakota voters see the same thing you do when it comes to our voter ID laws or our election integrity in the state.
And that's fine. Let's go this other place. I am a 30-year college administrator. I do the unsexy part of administering policy, of writing policy, of following the rules, of doing national compliance. I manage offices. I manage budgets. I am a put my nose in the book and do the work kind of guy. And that's what the Secretary of State's office is, and that's what I'm ready to do on day one. Second piece, if you are comfortable with one party owning all parts of your government and being able to control all parts of your government, which is what we have right now, then, we've got that solution. If you would like somebody who's going to be the whistleblower, who's going to be the insider, who's going to be the guy who will never cooperate with whatever plan is going on with the Bergen plan or whatever, I'm your guy. I'm going to do the work, but I'm also going to be the guy that's going to say, I don't agree with the Republican agenda on this.
Would you say, I'm going to give you a chance to rephrase that. You said never cooperate. I don't think a lot of people want to hear that. Okay. Maybe you want to rephrase that.
That's really fair. Thanks. I'm not going to put up with shenanigans.
What sort of shenanigans?
I don't know. I'm not an insider right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, give me an example.
Right.
I mean, you're a citizen of the state. You see how we govern things like, the Secretary of State, in addition to having, the duties of Secretary of State, handling business filings and running elections like that, also sits on some pretty significant statewide boards, the land board. You're a citizen. You've seen the way these boards govern. How would you do things differently than how Al Jaeger's been doing them?
So you asked me two different questions, and I guess I was prepared for the first. Let me go to the second. again, university administrator, I spend most of my day in some sort of meeting. I understand how to walk in, how to have a mission for the meeting that we have, and how to comply with the rules and policies that this group is supposed to do. I don't know that I have a particular opinion about how we're managing the land grant trust. I'm keenly aware that the Constitution says that we should be funding public education from soup to nuts out of the general fund instead of through property taxes, and we are not in compliance with the Constitution. I don't know how to change that, but I know how to ask that question whenever I'm in the right room.
Yeah.
You asked the question about what kind of shenanigans. Stingham was part of the party that sued the government over trying to get rid of Obamacare. The belief of the Republican Party around the country, and Stingham was a part of this, that you should not be able to get insurance through the government, that the only insurance you should ever be able to purchase is through a private provider. And Stingham was part of that court case. I don't know how that came to be. I don't know who authorized it. I don't know that he had the ability to do that without the mandate of the government, or at least not without the mandate of the executive, the government, or the legislature. He just decided. I would like to have known more about how he had the authorization and what his motives were as he was doing that. He was taking away, or trying to take away, something that a lot of people depend on, and there was no reason that was given other than, I just don't like this.
Do you think? I mean, I kind of think, and again, I'm wondering, as Secretary of State, like what function of that office do you think is bleeds over into demanding answers from the Attorney General?
Nobody is more responsible for protecting the rights of voters in the state, and it's really specific to voting rights. But how does an executive get to make a decision like that without having somebody who's voted for it, or without having authorized representatives vote for it? I'm not positive that the AG gets to do that without some sort of oversight.
Yeah. I mean, the AG is elected in and of himself or herself,
yes,
as the case may be. And also, I mean, let's not forget, I mean, we're talking about, in the specific example that you mentioned, when Earl Pomeroy voted for Obamacare in 2009, that cost him the election in 2010, and he believes that as much as anyone. I've talked with him about it. So, I mean, I don't know. I think most North Dakotans, you may disagree with it, but I think most North Dakotans were probably fine with Wayne Stingham suing over Obamacare.
And assuming that it's fine and having a vote to determine it's fine are two different things.
Yeah. Do you think?
I don't know. I think the government should be responsible to the people. You may disagree with me, Rob. I'm kidding, of course. I know that you're not. But the government actions should be governed by the people.
Do you? Because that sets up. We live in a very populist age, and in fact, I think a lot of our dysfunction right now stems from that populism. I am not a populist. I don't believe in direct democracy. I think it's a foolish way to govern. I think the American system of government was designed in many ways to avoid that, including the fact that we didn't originally elect our senators. We have the Electoral College. We have a lot of anti-majoritarian institutions in our government, and frankly, I think they're a feature. So I don't really want to put every decision up to a vote. I think you elect an attorney general, you watch the decisions they make, and if you don't like them, you either recall them or you vote for somebody else in the next general election, or the next primary, I guess, as the case may be.
Absolutely. I do believe that there are times that your representatives are meant to make decisions. Again, back to my one example. I'm not positive that the AG gets to sue on behalf of the state if the state isn't being named as a defendant. He made a choice. He made an elective choice to spend our money to participate in a lawsuit.
Yeah. Why didn't you run for attorney general?
I'm not a lawyer, and the Constitution requires that you be a lawyer to run for AG.
Fair enough. Good answer.
And I follow the Constitution because I'm a Democrat, dude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a loaded statement. There's a lot of things that we could argue that aren't in the Constitution that Democrats are for, up to like Roe v. Wade, which was a decision reading a right into the Constitution that wasn't there. But let's not start that debate. Let's. Why were you so late getting into the race? I was at the Democratic State Convention in Minot. I don't think you were there. You didn't announce your campaign until afterwards, and then the Democratic Executive Committee endorsed you then. Why so late getting into the race?
So I first, don't assume that you know everything. We had this conversation back in January. This was something that I had planned on, and then we had some stuff that was going on at work. I'm a state employee, and like most folks that are working in the university system, we're trying to figure out how to do more with less, and I just wasn't certain that I could fit this into my life. We got through March. I didn't come to the convention because I wasn't going to run, and we thought we had somebody who was ready, and they backed out, and the executive committee reapproached me. And of course, I was interested. I care about voting rights. I care about making sure that our democracy works. I care about making sure that Democrats are 30% of the state. We're not 50, and that is a problem, but we're 30% of the state. And if we aren't on the ballot, and we don't at least have the opportunity for folks to say the direction we're going is not the right direction, we need to be looking at other options. So I'm on the ballot because I care about this state.
Do you why do you think North Dakota Republicans, and I've seen polls when it comes to self-identification, and there's different ways of measuring this, so I don't think, but I've seen polls where Democrats identify, North Dakotans identify themselves as Democrats at a rate of about 19 to 20%. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people who identify themselves as independents, and then they'll vote Democrats, which is why I think on the ballot, you'll usually see Democratic candidates get around a third of the vote, 30% in that ballpark. Different ways of measuring it. But why? I mean, that didn't used to be the case, as we mentioned earlier in the interview. Why do you think people in places like North Dakotans have turned their backs on Democrats?
I think as our politics have become more fueled and more louder, that it is harder and harder to feel like you can talk about politics in a quiet, civil way. And I think Democrats feel that more than Republicans do. And I'm not sure that I'm ready to say it's because Republicans are more likely to be violent or whatever, but I think there is a sense amongst my friends that they need to be a little more careful than our neighbors do. I'm on the board at my synagogue, and the synagogue here in Grand Forks, I'm on the board. And we spend as much time in our business meetings talking about safety issues as we do about liturgy, because the shootings that have happened in the last 8-9 years that involve churches or synagogues or schools or malls or wherever, we feel like we're amongst the targets that somebody could have. Do I think it's likely? Of course I don't. I'm not living my life in fear, but I am cognizant that there is a sense of fear that is there. And I think it is more keenly felt by my colleagues, by my friends, by my circle of friends who are more likely to be Democrats. We're trying to get somebody to run in District 17, Ray's district, and we can't find a Democrat to run there. At South Grand Forks, Ray won by 9 points. It's a very winnable race. We can't find anybody who isn't afraid of the likelihood of their house being vandalized, the likelihood of their kid being, picked on for some reason, some online bullying. We've gotten meaner, and I don't know if that's all Trump or all right side or all left side. I don't know where it comes from.
You're making it sound like it's really left. And I just don't see that. I talk to a lot of people who run for elected office all over the place. And I mean, politics can be a brutal business, but you're the first person I have talked to in 20 years of writing about politics in North Dakota who has suggested that someone is afraid to run for public office because their house might get vandalized. I've never heard that
I've
before.
got 20, and that's interesting. I've got 20 people that can tell you that.
And you're supposed. I mean, you talk about shootings and things like that. I mean, we could talk about the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, which were hugely violent, where we saw protesters throwing Molotov cocktails and trying to implant propane bombs in roadblocks. We could talk about, the number of police stations that got burned down over the last couple of years. I don't think the right has a monopoly on violence. And I think people, and I say this fully, I mean, I don't know that there's many people who were more loudly condemning of the January 6th riot. I think it's disgusting. I think it's disgusting that Republicans are so reticent to hold Donald Trump responsible for it. That disgusts me, but it frustrates me when I hear people on the left talk about it as if this trend towards extremism and violence is only something that happens on the right, when we see lots of extremely violent left-wing protests. Look at what happened in Portland. That's a problem. I mean, I think extremism is a problem across the board.
I agree with that last statement right there.
So how do we fix it? I mean, how do we get back to a place where we can trust one another again, and we can, because I don't want to be in a place where I tell myself every cycle I'm open to voting for a Democrat. And as a matter of fact, years ago I once endorsed Cory Mock for Secretary of State because I was a little fed up with Al Jagger, and I didn't feel like, for things like business filings, I felt like he wasn't embracing the modern era. It was really I think Alvin Jagger's an honorable man and a good man, but I think in some ways he wasn't embracing the realities of his job and the modern challenges. And I endorsed Cory Mock. I would not have a problem voting for the right Democrat. I have a hard time finding Democrats who stand for what I want to stand for. That's my struggle as a conservative North Dakotan. I look at the Democratic Party and it's like, you guys aren't offering me anything.
So you wrote an article during the Democratic Party, during the Democratic Convention, where you said you need, speaking to the world, not to the Democrats, that you need to care about the Democratic Party more than they seem to care about themselves. You remember this line?
Yeah.
And what I have spent many weeks thinking about is how we can cooperate with Republicans in order to help the Democratic Party be sound. And that shouldn't be a ridiculous lift. I remember Nancy Pelosi standing on the floor of the well saying, we need to have a Republican Party that will work with us. This is not party-based. This is about America. We need to have more than one functioning party, and more than two would actually be great. But we need to have, at least two functioning parties. I want to talk about ranked choice voting for our House districts. I think that if we were to do something listen to me. I think if we were to do something like that, we'd create a situation where we would have roughly 20 districts that would send 1 and 1. Right now, there's only 6 districts that send 1 and 1. I think it would allow for a little bit more variety and diversity in the voices we have. I think it also allows for a third party to have a chance. If they could be the second choice of a lot of folks, I think that we would see a very different House. You talked to Ben the other day, and he was talking about getting rid of the Senate, and I like that idea. That's not really a part of the proposal that I'm pitching, but I would love to see a House that had a little bit more diversity in it.
I don't know. Sometimes when I hear Democrats in North Dakota talk about, well, let's change the rules, let's do the legislative districts, everything, I feel like it's an excuse to change procedure to put more Democrats in office so that you don't have to change the way you talk to North Dakotans. Like you don't have to consider whether or not the ideas and the policies you're promoting are actually appealing to the majority of voters. I mean, I hear the process arguments, and honestly, it sounds like an excuse.
And I agree with the first 18 words you said and not the last 30. But I will say that we are 30% of the electorate and we're 16% of the legislature. There is a political problem. I absolutely agree with you. We need to work harder. Our policies are the right policies, and most Americans and most North Dakotans agree with that. They just don't understand the branding piece. But there's also a structural problem if you are only at half of your vote value in the House that makes decisions. And so there is a structural argument as well as the political argument that you're asserting.
I mean, listen, if given some of the people that the North Dakota Republicans are electing to office, and I question whether some of the lawmakers we've elected can read, frankly. If Democrats can't pick up votes, and that's in that environment, I don't think it's a structural problem. I don't think that we've had this structure. We had this structure back when Democrats did have the legislature and most of the statewide offices. It's the same structure. I think the problem is the policy and the philosophy and the candidates. And I don't like anything that deviates from that, because I'm really tired of people trying to and maybe this gets back to what you're talking about with voter ID. You perceive that as Republicans trying to manipulate the process to get better outcomes for themselves. I don't want that. I want it to be about ideas, and I want it to be about policies and the ideas and policies that can win. We've done these elections the way we've done them for a long, long time. I think they're fine. I think we need to talk about the ideas and the policies. Find what North Dakotans want and talk about that.
And what I just suggested is that we take a look at the Constitution to change it. That's not changing the rules because you don't like it. That's going through a process through which we determine how we're going to be governed. You are impugning me whenever you say I'm about changing the rules, when I'm saying I want to have a conversation about looking at our Constitution.
About changing the rules. Anyway, we disagree on that. I do wish that ballot measure that came up, which unfortunately was dishonestly circulated in that they tried to claim it was just about military voting, and then the Supreme Court ultimately, I kind of wish that had made the ballot, if only so that we could have watched it go down in flames, and maybe we could stop talking about things like ranked choice voting. I think that would have been nice, but unfortunately they didn't make the ballot.
There you go.
Any last thoughts, or where do people go to find out more information about your campaign?
Sure. I've got a website, Powell4ND.com, and you can find me there. I tweet a little bit. I'm on Facebook, so I'm easy to find, but really the website's the best place to go, Powell4ND.com.
All right. Sorry, go ahead.
I've had a great time. I'm ready for this job. I do the unsexy part of university policy. I'm ready to do the unsexy part of state policy as well.
Jeff, thanks for your time.
Hey, Rob. Happy day. Thanks.
Want more political news like this? Visit inforum.news/port to get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Don't wait. Get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now.